Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is one of the articles in Axios. Trump could get partial victory after Supreme Court hears immunity case, or partial immunity victory. So he'll get a huge, enormous, historic constitutional victory over the special counsel. Everyone is talking about that being the case. That's number one. Number two, I have focused a great deal on the jail sentence, the conviction being overturned by the Supreme Court before November 5th, hopefully before July 11th, sentencing. Those are two monumental Supreme Court cases that you can find articles talking about Trump getting a huge victory. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Let's talk about how the state of New York cannot level a federal charge against Trump without the federal government involved. The FEC did not find Trump. They dropped the case against Trump. So did the Department of Justice. Yet, the state of New York elevated misdemeanors to felonies, and then they want to say, you see, it's the same thing as Hunter, and with the laptop, and Joe, and the foundation, and everything. That's not the same thing. You know there's obvious graft and bribery on one side, and then there's a desperate attempt to elevate misdemeanors into felonies on the other side with Trump. But hit subscribe. The FEC did not level any fine against Trump. The FEC dropped the hush money case. The federal government dropped the hush money case. Yet the state of New York leveled federal crimes against Trump. It's blatantly unconstitutional. You're going to hear, ladies and gentlemen, a former FEC commissioner and former Missouri Attorney General right now. The Supreme Court today, actually, huge victory for the Constitution. Yesterday, huge victory for Democrats. So Democrats, it's not like, and Samuel Alito backed Democrats on something that was important to them. You can look it up. But the thing is, Democrats want complete and total victories. That's why they know the Supreme Court is going to side with Trump on immunity, presidential immunity, and overturn his absurd guilty verdict. So they're livid. And it's like, they can't just say, a conservative Supreme Court sided with us on a major topic related to health care yesterday. And then the Supreme Court sided with conservatives today on the Second Amendment. But see, Democrats, they claim they want, a bipartisan, they want to reach some kind of middle ground, but they really don't. Anyway, that's another story. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started.
Hill today as House Republicans hold a hearing on former President Trump's New York trial. Bragg citing scheduling conflicts. He is set to testify, though, on July 12th, just one day after Trump's sentencing. Federal Election Commissioner Trey Traynor and Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey set to testify today at today's hearing, and they join me now. Trey, you notice I emphasized the election in your title. I guess we're finally set to hear from somebody who actually understands how election law works. Juan Merchan cannot silence you. What are the top points, Trey, you're going to try and drive home today?
Well, the most important point is that Judge Merchan completely obliterated what's been longstanding federal election law with the jury charge that he gave, asking the jury whether Donald Trump had willfully contributed to a campaign. And the legal standard has long been knowing and willful standard, so he's completely upended that standard. And it's one of those things where the Department of Justice should have intervened early in this case and protected the jurisdiction of the federal government to enforce federal campaign finance law. They didn't. They didn't protect the jurisdiction of the Federal Election Commission. And it's completely perplexing why they didn't do that. There's long-standing Supreme Court precedent that says that they should have. And it's just how law works. People always fight over jurisdiction. They never give that up. And in this case, it was ceded so easily. Andrew, Democrats, of course, are going to.
This is the third Federal Election Commission chairman that you will hear on this channel. The first was Bradley Smith. The second was Hans A. von Spakovsky. And now the third, former FEC chairman Trey Traynor. So this is huge, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm trying to tell the world that the federal government, just like Mr. Trainer stated just now, the state cannot level a federal charge at anyone without the federal government involved. It's blatantly unconstitutional. And future President Trump will get a huge, huge Supreme Court victory when they see the guilty verdict. They're going to see the guilty verdict before November 5th. The future of the country is at stake. So they're going to have to see it before November 5th. And when they do, it'll very likely be, I imagine all the conservatives, you could even get a unanimous decision overturning the guilty verdict. Because like Mr. Trainer stated just now, you cannot have the federal government cede authority, well, in this case, Biden's DOJ, which is an extension now of the Democratic Party, cede authority to the state. The DOJ should have told the state, hey, you know what? You can't indict or convict Trump on a federal statute without listing the actual federal statute. There's no federal statute, by the way, that he is convicted of. They haven't even notified the world of which federal statute Trump was convicted of. That's how unconstitutional all of this is.
To try and flip the script, calling today's hearing playing politics. And they're going to make this point, Andrew, A.G. Bailey. They merely follow the facts and the law up there in New York City. How will you cut the legs out from under that argument?
Well, they bent the law to meet the facts in a specious legal charge. There's an unseemly amount of prosecutorial misconduct. And at the end of the day, what that does is it injects both statutory and constitutional violations into the process from the charging document onto the jury deliberations. And so this is a legally errant conviction. It's not a legally valid conviction. And that emphasizes the illicit nature of the witch hunt prosecution. And it's important that the American people understand that the goal here was never to convict President Trump of a crime. It was always to remove him from the campaign trail. Now, this is a presidential candidate that has a right to speak and that we as a people have a right to access. This has done immeasurable damage to our democratic republic, and we've got to hold wrongdoers accountable.
Let's focus on this. Matthew.
It's not legally valid, ladies and gentlemen. It's not legally valid. That's why I keep doing the segments. They have already overturned. Each of these justices on the Supreme Court have already overturned this absurd guilty verdict in their minds. They've already thought about it. It's pretty obvious. You have to have just a little understanding of the law. You don't need to be a legal scholar. You need a little bit of you need a cursory knowledge of the way government works to realize that the state of New York, no state, can level a federal statute at an individual without the DOJ, or in this case, the Federal Election Commission, involved. So it'll be overturned. That's 100% certain. I just don't know when. It must be before November 5th. It should be also before July 11th, the sentencing.
Colangelo, Alvin Bragg dichotomy here at A.G. Bailey, because the number 3 starter right now in the Yankees rotation is not waving his hand and saying, please send me to single A so I can ply my craft. What possible reason could Matthew Colangelo, the number 3 at the Department of Justice, have to leave the DOJ, go down to the Manhattan DA, if not for his desire to help the Democrats and get Trump?
Yeah, the DOJ may not have intervened to reassert the jurisdiction of the FEC. That's the appropriate legal avenue for the DOJ. But instead what they did was deploy resources to the state of New York in the form of Matthew Colangelo, like you said, the former third-ranking official in Biden's Department of Justice who led the trial court prosecution against President Trump on behalf of Alvin Bragg. So he takes a pay cut to go work in state court. He's politically motivated. Those prosecutors should have been disqualified from prosecuting that case. There was no case to begin with. A subsequent prosecutor that the court could have appointed would have identified that and dismissed it before it got this far. And again, Biden is behind this whole thing. I mean, he has managed the Department of Justice that also administers grants on behalf of the Soros-backed Vera Institute to Alvin Bragg's office with the intent of dismantling the criminal justice system. So while Alvin Bragg is ignoring crime in the subways and on the city streets, he is being trained to weaponize the criminal justice system against Biden's political opponents.
Trey, quick final word to you. If we don't stop this lawfare right now in its tracks, can our century-old justice system survive?
No, it can't. And we have a big threat to the First Amendment and whether or not candidates can actually run for office in any state, because we'll have turned loose all the prosecutors across the country, whether they be state or local prosecutors, to go after individual candidates for perceived violations of campaign finance law.
Thank you for what you're about.
So that's exactly what Bradley Smith, that's exactly what Hans A. von Spakovsky stated. They stated the exact same thing, ladies and gentlemen. Hit subscribe if you're new. Not only will the guilty verdict be overturned because it's blatantly unconstitutional, it's not even legally valid according to the Missouri AG, but it's completely unconstitutional and legally not valid. But here, this is what Trump's legal team needs to do. Initially, according to Greg Jarrett and Alan Dershowitz, I think the Supreme Court has to get involved before any appeal. But let's listen. It's very interesting, the timeline
of what is next, what should be next. If you're advising the Trump legal team, what would you advise them? What would the next steps be as we head into this July 11th sentencing?
Well, I think you have to look to an appeal. And, higher court judges in New York, Sean, are just like Merchan. I mean, they're mini-me's. This is a liberal, politically driven club. They protect their own. So I'm not optimistic at the former president's chances to overturn the conviction, which means that Trump's only real relief is in the federal courts. But that's the proper venue anyway, because as Jonathan pointed out, most of the egregious violations by the judge, these were constitutional due process rights, for example, refusing to tell the defendant what this conspiracy crime was that we still don't know.
They refused to tell Trump the federal crime he committed within a specific legal statute. They refused to tell Trump how he conspired and broke the law, broke federal law.
That's a clear violation of the Sixth Amendment. And then, of course, telling the jury they can forget all about a unanimity. That is a bedrock constitutional right derived from the Sixth and Seventh Amendment. Judge Merchan made a mockery of that, as well as justice, with a multitude of reversible errors that are quite shocking, I think, to everyone. And it's not, it is the federal courts, not state courts, that they're the ones who tend to scrupulously guard our due process rights. So, there may be a dual track here. You've got to go through the state system. Maybe you'll get lucky and, some judges with a conscience who are schooled in the law will look at this and say, this is fundamentally wrong, we reverse. But I think in the end, it's going to be the federal courts, maybe even the Supreme Court, that corrects this incredible injustice.
Yeah, let's get your take, Professor. And what would the next steps be for you if you were talking to President Trump's attorneys?
By the way, it's possible the Supreme Court wants to wait until Trump is sentenced to jail, which would be terrible because they're going to want to sentence Trump to jail. So the Supreme Court has to get involved. I just don't know when. When they do, because they've already overturned it, essentially, in their minds. Each of the justices, especially the conservatives, has stated it's unconstitutional. The whole thing's absurd. But the question is when.
I would do something quite radical. I would move immediately for the sentencing to occur next week, not July 11th, so that you can get the appeal going. You can't appeal until there's a sentence. If the court refused to expedite the sentencing, I would try to take the case now immediately to the New York Court of Appeals, skipping the Intermediate Court of Appeals, which is a political court, Manhattan-based, Democrats largely. I would try to go right to the Court of Appeals and ask them for a decision within 30 days in order to get to the Supreme Court before the election. There's no reason to have the sentencing delayed until July 11th. The judge knows what he's going to do today.
Professor, why would you have any confidence that Judge Merchan would expedite the sentencing? Because I have, to me, I think the obvious thing to do if it was him would be to say, all right, you're released on your own recognizance pending appeal. I don't have faith he'll do that.
No, that's not the point. The point is to impose the sentence now so that there can be an appeal. If the judge refuses, as he would, take the case to the Court of Appeals and say, Your Honors, we want the sentencing to be done now so we can appeal. If the judge refuses to allow the sentencing to impose, Your Honors, let us appeal now. We're not going to appeal necessarily.
That's really smart. That's actually brilliant. They should demand sentencing tomorrow. And if the judge in the case says, we're going to wait till July 11th, then they go to the appeals court and says, we have a right to get the sentence that you think we deserve. Then they can appeal the sentence to the Supreme Court. So if they have to get to the Supreme Court, it's a race to the Supreme Court. So that's a brilliant strategy.
The sentencing. Now we're going to appeal the conviction. So I would do everything to expedite this. Timing is everything.
Very dangerous.
So, ladies and gentlemen, he's going to get two major, actually three if you want to talk about the January cases, but two major victories, really, very soon. We're talking before November, but hopefully before July 11th. One is presidential immunity, which will completely dismantle the special counsel cases. He gets presidential immunity. They'll have to rewrite the indictments, and they won't be able to convict him at all, even get close to a trial. And Trump is going to win in a landslide. Be here, by the way, on November 5th. This entire, June, July, August, September, October. We have 5 months, ladies and gentlemen. We're almost at 250,000 subscribers, and it's because of you. And I thank each and every one of you, everyone watching in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in the Philippines. God bless you all, everywhere around the world. Thank you. Nepal, thank you for watching. Everywhere you're watching, thank you. New Zealand, anywhere around the world. Nigeria, I have viewers everywhere, and I thank God for that. But every single day is about November 5th. And it's about the presidential immunity victory that I've been telling everybody about. It was also about the 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision. And these are major, huge victories for Trump that prove the rule of law, the Constitution, our republic, is predicated upon the Supreme Court defending Trump from obvious and overt unconstitutional decisions. MSNBC, CNN, they can go on, and the New York Times, Washington Post, they can talk about democracy all they like. But when you have a unanimous Supreme Court, even the liberal justices overturning the Colorado ban, I said would take place. There's a reason the channel's at almost 250,000 subs. I told everyone it would take place, and I'm even more certain about the presidential immunity victory and also about the Supreme Court overturning the jail sentence. They might get the jail sentence. There's a 5% chance he actually goes to jail, which would be another Pyrrhic victory for Democrats. But again, it's like they don't realize that every time they think they've won, they really haven't won. This confirms that Trump's going to win a landslide on November 5th. But hit subscribe. Be here on November 5th and beyond as well. This is the Heritage Foundation Vice President really brilliantly describing what's taken place.
Johnson wants the Supreme Court to step in on Trump's verdicts. Roll it.
I haven't had conversations with the justices. I just know their character, their personality. I know what they've said in the past. They are deeply concerned, as we are, about maintaining our system of justice. I think they're concerned about using courtrooms for politics and political retribution. We all are. We all should be. Every American. That's what I was referring to. And I think in their heart of hearts, they're concerned about it just like we are.
Right. Roger Severino is a former DOJ trial attorney and joins me now. Roger, can the Supreme Court step in?
Yes, it can. Maybe not right now because there's an appeal process. But if he's actually convicted and sent to jail, he was already convicted. If he's sent to jail, there's a petition called habeas that could go to federal court. But this just goes to show we're discussing whether or not a former president running for office right now.
They might not sentence him to jail only because the Supreme Court would get involved and overturn it. But you know what? I think they want to sentence him to jail. and they don't care. They'll roll the dice. And they're already campaigning against the Supreme Court. So they'll roll the dice and they'll lose. The Supreme Court will overturn it. Then they can say forever, oh my God, he was convicted. It's unconstitutional. Only Democrats and certain delusional Republicans or Democrats, whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter political party, but only Democrats today would view a Supreme Court decision as unconstitutional. They're the ones who interpret the constitutionality of a case of what takes place, a law in the U.S. It's really hilarious.
Now, might face jail time. This is shocking that America has reached this point where we're trying to convict political opponents instead of deciding at the ballot box. I mean, President Trump was right. After the real conviction, the real decision, the real verdict is going to be on November 5th.
But do you believe that this was a deliberate political having a go at Donald Trump politically through the courts?
Oh, absolutely. They invented a crime. And the legal errors are just legion. Here you had a politicized judge with a politicized prosecutor and a politicized jury pool inventing a new crime of a federal campaign finance violation based on falsification of state records. It is so confusing. And then the judge said, you don't even have to be unanimous in the verdict. You could have 4 juries vote for one, 4 for another, and 4 for another. It was choose your own adventure. That is not how legal systems run. And it just goes to show this was politics from the beginning. It was about getting Trump, showing the man, and I will show you the crime. It's just like the communist days all over again. Unfortunately, it's happening here in the United States.
Roger, Utah Senator Mitt Romney accused Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg of committing, quote, political malpractice by pursuing the Trump case. Seems like Republicans across the board are supporting Trump after these convictions. What say you on this?
Oh, yes. He just raked in $200 million in donations. That is extraordinary because the American people see right through this, right? This is a politically charged election interference. They're trying to take away the people's vote, the right to decide this at the ballot box instead of in the court of law. And this was a kangaroo court. And the American people were responding in droves. And you mentioned earlier the African-American vote. You would see an uptick there, too. You know, there's a whole lot of concern over African-American exposure to the legal system. And now President Trump says, hey, look, I could relate. I was railroaded, too. This happens. It could happen to the president. It could happen to you. It happens in the country. And we cannot have a weaponized justice system. Right. And that's one of the key campaign promises of President Trump, de-weaponize the justice system.
Okay, Roger, now listen to this. Former FBI Director James Comey, he says putting Trump in jail is doable.
This is very amusing. Listen to this.
Roll tape.
Do you agree with that it would be difficult or nearly impossible for the law enforcement institutions to put him in actual jail?
No, they would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass. And he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population, but it's obviously doable.
Roger, what do you think?
It's very doable. No big deal. It's a double wide. You just put Trump in a double wide with the 30 Secret Service agents. No problem. And, of course, Hillary Clinton had top secret intelligence transferred onto servers, illegal. It's impossible to do so from a cybersecurity perspective, but no reasonable prosecutor would indict. I mean, for 4 years, you had classified data siphoned onto secret private servers. But, Trump is double wide. You can go into a double wide because, he had a misdemeanor record-keeping issue that wasn't even a record-keeping issue, and the FEC dropped the case, and it's blatantly unconstitutional, but double wide. It's just you send them to the double wide. No problem. And then Hunter is obvious bribery and graft, where the New York Post literally published emails saying, asking Hunter and Joe, how can you use your influence on the company's behalf? Joe takes 10%, according to one of the emails. He's called the big man, according to another email. And you have millions of dollars flowing into shell corporations run by the Bidens. But of course, Trump is going into the double wide, going to the big house, going to the pokey. Why? Because you need a record-keeping misdemeanor. And nobody's above the rule of law in our country.
I think the chances are that Donald Trump will actually wind up in a jail cell.
I hope it's low, but the radical left shows there's no bottom to how craven they could be. The fact that it is a possibility is shocking. And look what's happened. It is as if the dog finally caught up to the bumper and caught it, and the left doesn't know what to do. They wanted to convict President Trump, 34 felonies. Most people get jail time for felonies. Maybe they'll put him in house arrest. Maybe they'll put an ankle bracelet on him. Who knows what they're going to do? They had their show trial, and now they're afraid of the consequences because they realize they made a tragic mistake here. The American people are rallying to President Trump. The radical left got what they wish for, but now they're realizing that maybe they should have been more careful what they wish for.
Trump says he's okay with house arrest or even jail. What do you make of that? Perhaps he wants it.
Well, yeah, there was a member of Congress was talking about introducing a bill to take away Secret Service protection of former presidents to try to increase the odds if he goes to jail time that something bad happens to him. That is just extreme, right? The Secret Service is there to protect the president no matter the circumstances. And again, the fact that we're even discussing this shows that this is politics pure and simple. They distracted him from the campaign trail. He was sitting for weeks in a trial. He couldn't go out. He had a gag order. And this is the weaponization of the justice system. We are better than this as a country.
So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, they want Trump in jail. And that's why I do these segments. They do very well. My channel's growing because I'm telling the world that the jail sentence will be overturned by the Supreme Court or lower courts, by the way. I'm going to claim victory as well if lower courts and appeals court overturns it too. So it's like, you know what? It's blatantly unconstitutional. Hit subscribe to this channel. I should be back tonight at 10. If not, I will be back tomorrow at around I would say about 3 p.m. Eastern. But he's going to get 2 major constitutional victories. Major victories that will propel him, I think, to a landslide. Be here on this channel November 5th. Tell your friends. You're watching around the world. There's a lot of great channels to watch on November 5th. But be here. It'll be a beautiful, amazing celebration. It'll be part of American history. We'll be talking about this election for generations in a good way, in a beautiful, hopefully in a beautiful, good, wonderful way. Hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow, everybody. I should be back tonight, but we'll see. Have a great weekend. God bless you all.